The sound of a plate smashing echoed through the tiny kitchen. "Starting next month, you'll pay rent if you want to stay here." Bella froze, still holding her mother's old cup, the one she'd been washing carefully. Rent? In her own childhood home? Her mother, Zena, stood by the counter, arms crossed, her face cold. "You're 22 now, Bella. You're not a child. You can't live here for free forever." Bella wanted to argue, but her throat tightened. She had been paying most of the bills already, groceries, electricity, even her little brother's school fees. But before she could speak, Zena turned away and muttered under her breath, "Your sister never made me feel like a burden." That night, Bella packed her bags, unaware that walking out that door would set off a chain of events that would expose every lie her family had ever told. Bella stood in the small living room, her hands trembling as her mother's words sank in. Rent. In the house where she had grown up, the same house she helped maintain, cooking, cleaning, and paying most of the bills. For years, she had quietly worked 2 jobs, one at the bakery during the day and one at a printing shop at night, just to keep the family comfortable. She never complained when her paycheck went to groceries, or when her little brother needed new shoes. She thought her mother saw her sacrifices. But now, standing before Zena's cold expression, she realized she had been wrong. When she asked how much rent, Zena crossed her arms, her lips curling into a faint smirk. "Nigerian naira 200,000 a month," she said. Bella blinked, thinking she had heard wrong. That was almost her entire monthly income. She whispered, "Mama, that's more than I make." But Zena didn't care. "Then find somewhere cheaper," she said, turning away as if the conversation was over. It wasn't about money, Bella knew that now. It was about pushing her out. Her sister Imani never faced this kind of treatment. Imani lived in the city, posting pictures in fancy restaurants, wearing new clothes every week. Whenever she came home, Zena's face lit up with pride. But with Bella, it was always silence, or criticism. "You're too quiet. You work too much. Why can't you be more like your sister?" The words always cut deep, but Bella stayed because she believed family was worth the effort. That night, Bella sat on her bed, looking around her small room filled with childhood memories, her school trophies, her old drawings, her mother's laughter echoing faintly from the past. Everything felt distant now. Her eyes filled with tears as she realized this was no longer her home. She wasn't being asked to contribute. She was being told she didn't belong. Before dawn, she packed her clothes into a small bag, folded her blanket, and took one last look at the house. Her mother didn't come out to say goodbye. The silence was heavier than any argument could have been. Bella left the house quietly, her heart breaking but her spirit steady. She didn't know where she would go or how she would manage, but she knew one thing. She wouldn't beg to stay where she wasn't wanted. For the first time, she walked away not just from her home, but from the pain that had lived there for years. The morning light crept through the curtains as Bella folded her last shirt into her small travel bag. Her eyes were swollen from crying through the night, but she refused to let another tear fall. On the fridge, she left a small handwritten note. "Thanks for everything. I'll figure things out." It was short, polite, and distant, just like the love she had received from her mother in recent years. She looked around the kitchen one last time. The same place she used to help her mother cook, laugh, and dream. Now it felt empty, cold, and unfamiliar. Without saying goodbye, she quietly stepped out, the sound of her footsteps fading down the hallway. Bella found a small, run-down apartment near the busy market. The walls were cracked, and the ceiling leaked when it rained. Her bed was nothing more than a thin mattress on the floor, and most nights she fell asleep still wearing her work clothes. She survived on instant noodles and biscuits, sometimes skipping meals just to save money. Still, despite her struggle, she continued sending part of her paycheck to pay her little brother's school fees. She couldn't let him suffer because of their mother's choices. Days turned into weeks and no one called. Not a single message from Zena. Not even a, "How are you?" from Imani. Bella told herself they were busy, but deep inside, she knew they had moved on. She tried to stay strong, focusing on work, smiling at customers, pretending everything was fine. But every night, when she came home to her lonely room, she felt the weight of being forgotten by the people she loved the most. One Saturday evening, as Bella scrolled through her phone after a long day, her chest tightened. There it was, a photo posted by Imani. It showed their entire family sitting around a table filled with food, all smiles and laughter. Zena sat proudly in the middle, her hand resting on Imani's shoulder. The caption read, "Family is everything, Red Heart." Bella's fingers trembled as she stared at the screen. She wasn't tagged. She wasn't mentioned. It was like she never existed. Her throat tightened, and tears finally escaped down her cheeks. The same family she had worked so hard to support had erased her completely. For the first time, Bella allowed herself to feel the full pain of it, the truth that she had been replaced. That night, lying on her thin mattress, she whispered to herself, maybe family isn't blood. Maybe it's who stays when everyone else leaves. And for the first time, she began to imagine a life built only by her. And for her, it was another long night at the bakery. The smell of fresh bread filled the air as Bella wiped the counter, her hands tired and her eyes heavy. She had been working double shifts to cover rent and her brother's school fees. Most customers came and went without noticing her, but one man always did. His name was Tay. He was polite, well-dressed, and always asked how her day was going. Bella never thought much of it. She was used to keeping her distance from people. But that evening, when he walked in again, something felt different. He ordered his usual coffee and bread, but didn't leave right away. Instead, he stood quietly, watching her decorate a cake. "You're really talented," he said, his tone warm and genuine. Bella smiled shyly. "It's just something I enjoy," she replied, brushing off the compliment. But Tay wasn't convinced. "No," he said softly. "You have an eye for detail. People like you should be designing, not just baking." Bella laughed nervously, thinking he was just being kind. "Designing? I wish," she said. "But life doesn't always give people like me those chances." Tay reached into his pocket and handed her a small business card. "My company is hiring junior designers. We create packaging, ads, things like that. You should apply," he said. Bella stared at the card, hesitant. She didn't even have a proper degree, just sketches she used to draw when she was sad or lonely. "I'm not qualified," she murmured, but Tay smiled. "Sometimes talent is better than qualifications. Just try." Then he left, leaving Bella standing behind the counter with the card in her hand and a strange new feeling in her chest. Hope. That night, she sat in her small apartment, the light from her phone shining on her old sketchbook. Page after page there were drawings, cake designs, posters, even clothing patterns she used to imagine as a child. Her heart raced as she opened her email and attached the best ones to her application. Her hands trembled when she finally hit send. 2 days later, while cleaning the bakery floor, her phone rang. The voice on the other end said, "Is this Miss Bella? We reviewed your portfolio, and we'd like to offer you the position." Bella froze, unable to speak. The same girl who had been kicked out of her home was now being given her first real opportunity. For the first time in a long while, she smiled, not because of anyone else, but because she was finally proud of herself. The first day Bella walked into the design firm, she felt completely out of place. Everyone looked sharp and confident, dressed in neat suits, speaking in quick business tones. She clutched her small bag tightly, afraid someone would notice her trembling hands. But when she sat at her desk and opened her sketchbook, everything changed. The same creativity that once filled her lonely nights now became her strength. Her first design, a new bakery logo, impressed her supervisor so much that it was chosen for a national campaign. From that moment, Bella stopped doubting herself. Every day, she arrived early and stayed late, pouring her heart into every design. Her coworkers soon noticed her quiet determination, and even the CEO, Mr. Kalu, started asking for her input. One afternoon, he called her into his office. Bella's heart raced, thinking she had made a mistake, but instead he smiled and said, "You have a rare gift. You see emotion in color. That's what makes your work stand out." A week later, she received an official letter. She was being promoted to assistant designer, with a salary increase. For the first time in her life, Bella could breathe. She started saving money, bought a few new clothes, and even moved into a small but clean apartment with proper furniture. She decorated the walls with her artwork, small reminders of how far she had come. When she looked in the mirror now, she saw a confident young woman, not the scared girl who once cried herself to sleep on a thin mattress. But even with her success, a part of her heart still longed for her family. She tried calling her mother several times, hoping for a word of pride or at least a simple, "I'm happy for you." Each time, the phone rang unanswered. Once she even sent money for her brother, but it was returned without a message. It was as if she didn't exist anymore. That silence hurt more than poverty ever did. Still, Bella told herself that she would keep moving forward, even if no one clapped for her. Months passed, and Bella's name became known in the firm. Then one morning, her manager called her into a meeting to discuss a new project, a cafe design for a potential client. Bella was excited until she saw the names on the brief, Zina and Imani. Her hands froze on the paper. The same people who had thrown her out were now coming to her company for help. She closed her eyes for a moment, took a deep breath, and whispered to herself, "Maybe this is my turn to see who they really are." Life in Zina's house had changed completely since Bella left. The warmth that once filled the home was gone, replaced by tension and regret. Imani's boutique, once the pride of the family, began to fall apart slowly. Her biggest supplier disappeared after taking a large payment for materials that never arrived. Orders piled up, angry customers demanded refunds. And soon, the shop that was meant to make her rich became a source of endless stress. Every day, Imani sat behind the counter, pretending everything was fine while her savings disappeared one after another. Zina wasn't doing any better. Her small catering business, which had once kept food on the table, started losing clients. First, it was one canceled event, then two. Word spread that her dishes weren't as good as before, and people stopped calling. The refrigerator was half empty, and unpaid bills filled the kitchen drawer. For the first time, Zina began to understand how much Bella had quietly carried on her shoulders all those years, the groceries, the electricity, the school fees. But pride kept her from saying it out loud. One morning there was a loud knock on the door. The landlord stood there with a folded paper in his hand. "You have 1 week to move out," he said firmly. Zina froze, her heart pounding. "Move out? We just need a little more time," she pleaded, but the man shook his head. Months of unpaid rent had caught up with them. As the door closed, Imani sank to the floor, tears streaming down her face. "Mama, what are we going to do? We have nowhere to go." For the first time, Zina couldn't answer. The woman who always had control over everything now felt powerless. Imani hesitated for a moment before whispering, "Maybe we can call Bella. She has a good job now. Maybe she can help us." The room fell silent. Zina's jaw tightened, her pride burning hotter than her pain. "After what she did. Never," she snapped. But even as she said it, her voice trembled. That night, while Imani cried quietly in her room, Zina sat alone on the porch, staring into the darkness. She thought about the daughter she had pushed away, the one who used to fix everything without being asked. Deep inside, she knew the truth. It wasn't Bella who had abandoned them. It was she who had driven her away. Now, with her life crumbling around her, Zina faced the reality she had always ignored. The one person who could save them was the same one she had called a burden. Bella arrived at the office early that morning, as she always did. She poured herself a cup of coffee, reviewed her notes, and prepared for a client meeting scheduled by her manager. The file simply said "New Cafe Project," and she didn't think much of it. It was just another job, another opportunity to prove herself. She straightened her blazer, brushed a strand of hair behind her ear, and walked into the meeting room with her laptop in hand. She was ready to meet whoever was behind the project, until the door opened. Her heart stopped for a moment. Standing there were two familiar faces she never thought she'd see again. Her mother, Zina, and her sister, Imani. For a second, Bella thought her mind was playing tricks on her. Zina looked older, her once perfect hair now streaked with gray, her face tired and lined with worry. Imani's confidence had faded too. Her expensive clothes couldn't hide the sadness in her eyes. Bella froze, gripping her laptop tightly, trying to steady her breath. They didn't seem to recognize her. The manager smiled and said, "This is Bella, our lead designer. She'll be handling your cafe's design proposal." Bella watched as her mother's eyes widened in confusion, then disbelief. Imani blinked twice, as if trying to make sense of what she was seeing. Bella's appearance had changed so much, her posture, her glow, the quiet strength in her voice. She was no longer the timid girl they had once dismissed. Finally, Bella broke the silence. Her voice was calm, steady, and polite. Mom. Imani." Zina's face went pale, her lips parting slightly as she whispered, "Bella?" The room went completely still. Imani's mouth dropped open, and for a long moment, no one said a word. The same daughter they had pushed away was now sitting on the other side of the table, confident, successful, and in control. Zina tried to smile, her voice shaky. You work here?" she asked, trying to sound casual, but her embarrassment was clear. Bella nodded slightly. "Yes, and I'll be leading your project," she replied. Imani looked down at her hands, unable to meet Bella's eyes. As the meeting began, Bella stayed professional, explaining the cafe design, the cost, and the deadlines. Her tone was calm, her confidence unshaken, but inside her heart was pounding. She couldn't believe fate had brought them back together like this. Not as mother and daughter, but as client and designer. It was poetic justice. The girl who was once told to pay rent in her own home was now the one setting the price. Zina sat across from Bella, her fingers nervously tapping on the table. She tried to speak, but her voice trembled. "Bella, I didn't expect to see you like this," she said quietly. Her eyes were filled with regret, but Bella's expression remained calm. She had waited years to hear her mother's voice soften. Like that, yet it didn't bring her the peace she once thought it would. She looked at the papers before her and said in a professional tone, "Let's begin. The cafe project requires full payment up front and strict deadlines. If we agree on those terms, we can start immediately." Zina blinked in surprise, not expecting such distance. "Upfront payment?" she asked, her voice breaking slightly. "Bella, it's us, your family." Imani leaned forward, forcing a smile. "Yes, we're not strangers," she said, trying to sound warm. "We just need your help to get back on our feet." But Bella's face didn't change. She spoke gently, yet firmly. "Family doesn't charge rent to make someone feel unwanted," she said. The words hit both Zina and Imani like a sharp reminder of the past. The room went completely silent. Zina lowered her eyes, ashamed. For a long moment, no one spoke. Bella's heart tightened as she watched her mother's shoulders tremble slightly. She could feel the old love and hurt mixing inside her. The part that still wanted to forgive, and the part that remembered every tear she cried after being thrown out. Imani finally whispered, "We made mistakes, Bella. We didn't mean to hurt you like that." Bella wanted to believe her, but the wounds were still too deep. Keeping her voice steady, Bella said, "This isn't personal. It's business. I'll do my best to deliver quality work, but I expect the same respect you'd give any professional." Her words carried both grace and strength. Zina nodded slowly, realizing the daughter she once controlled was now standing before her as an independent woman, one who owed them nothing. As the meeting ended, Bella packed her files neatly, stood up, and gave them a polite smile. "If you decide to proceed, the company will contact you for payment confirmation," she said. Then she turned to leave, but paused briefly at the door. "I hope this cafe brings you peace," she added softly before walking out. Outside the meeting room, Bella leaned against the wall for a moment, closing her eyes. Her hands shook slightly. She had faced them without anger, without begging, just calm strength. And yet, a small ache remained in her heart. She had finally learned how to draw lines, but part of her still wondered, could forgiveness ever truly heal what pride once destroyed? Bella's world stopped when her assistant rushed into her office, holding a file with trembling hands. It was a contract for cafe supplies, and her name was signed at the bottom. But Bella never signed it. Confused, she flipped through the pages and realized what had happened. Someone had forged her signature to withdraw extra funds from the company's account. The deal was already public, and her reputation was now on the line. Clients were asking questions. Her staff looked uneasy, and whispers began to spread. Bella's heart pounded as she called the supplier. When they mentioned Imani's name, she froze. That evening, she drove straight to the cafe they were building. Imani and Zina were there, smiling as if nothing was wrong. Bella walked in, dropped the contract on the table and said quietly, "Who signed this?" Imani's face turned pale. She looked down, twisting her fingers. I just thought it would help move things faster," she whispered. Bella's voice hardened. "You forged my name, Imani. Do you know what that means? You could have destroyed everything I worked for." Zina stepped forward, defensive as always. "She made a mistake. You think you're so perfect now, sitting in your fancy office. You owe us this, Bella." "Oh, you," Bella repeated, her voice shaking. I owed you love, respect, and loyalty, and I gave all that. You turned it into debt. For a moment no one spoke. Then Imani broke down completely, crying uncontrollably. It was Mom's idea, she blurted out. She said if you lost something too, maybe you'd finally understand how much we've suffered. Bella's breath caught in her throat. She stared at her mother, eyes wide with disbelief. You told her to do this? Zena looked away. Her silence was answer enough. That night, Bella sat alone in her apartment. She stared out the window, watching the city lights blur through her tears. It wasn't anger that consumed her anymore. It was sorrow. She finally understood that her mother's cruelty wasn't about greed or pride. It was envy. Zena couldn't bear to see her daughter succeed where she had failed. Bella wiped her tears and whispered to herself, "Some people don't want to see you fail. They just can't stand to see you win without them." From that night on, Bella decided, no more second chances. She would protect her peace, even if it meant walking away from the people she once called family. Bella could have destroyed them with one email. After discovering the forgery, she had every reason to sue, expose them, or drag their names through the mud. But instead, she chose silence, not out of weakness but out of strength. She withdrew the contract from her company, making sure no one else would be affected by the scandal. Her legal team closed the case quietly, and she made sure every trace of the forged deal disappeared from the records. Zena and Imani were left with a half-finished cafe, no funds, and debts piling up faster than they could count. But late one night, as Bella reviewed her yearly bonuses, she paused. The same family who had thrown her out and called her selfish were now facing the kind of pain she once knew: helplessness. And despite everything, her heart softened. She didn't want revenge anymore. She just wanted peace. Without telling anyone, she transferred enough money to clear their cafe's debts. Using her own bonus, she asked the banker to keep her name off every record. Weeks passed. The cafe reopened. This time it was smaller, humbler, but run with honesty. Imani worked from dawn till night, learning to earn what she once took for granted. She stopped pretending, stopped competing, and one morning she showed up at Bella's office with a small basket of muffins and trembling hands. "I came to say thank you," Imani said quietly. "I know it was you who helped us. Mom doesn't know, but I do." Bella looked at her, surprised. "Why now?" she asked softly. Imani's eyes glistened. "Because you could have destroyed us, but you didn't. You taught me what strength really looks like." Then she posted a public message on her cafe's page that read, "My sister taught me that real strength comes from kindness, not revenge. I hope one day I can be half the woman she is." The post went viral. People admired Bella for her grace and heart, though she never spoke about it. She moved on quietly, focusing on her growing design firm and the peace she had built around her life. But Zena wasn't the same. Her pride had been her armor, and now that it was gone, she began to crumble. She avoided people, stopped attending social events, and her health declined. Every night, she sat by the window, replaying her choices, wondering how a mother's jealousy had turned her into her own enemy. Bella didn't see her again for a long time. Yet deep down she knew, sometimes losing power is the only way people learn the value of humility. Months later, Bella drove down the quiet street that once felt like the center of her world. Her old neighborhood looked smaller now, almost faded, as if time itself had erased the noise and pain that used to live there. When she reached her childhood home, she stopped and stared. The gate hung loosely, the paint on the walls had peeled, and the flowers she once planted with her father were gone. Everything looked tired, including the woman sitting on the porch, her mother. Zena looked older, weaker. Her once sharp voice was now a faint whisper. When she saw Bella, her eyes filled with tears she could no longer hold back. "You remind me so much of your father," she said, her voice trembling. "He left because I pushed him away too. I thought I was strong, but I was just scared. I didn't know how to love right." Bella walked closer, her heart both heavy and light at the same time. For years, she had imagined this moment, what she would say, what she would feel. But standing there now, all she felt was peace. She knelt beside her mother, took her hand gently and said, "I forgive you, Mama. But I can't move backward." Zena wept quietly. Bella reached into her bag and took out a small envelope, the same kind her mother used to hand her whenever she demanded rent money years ago. She placed it on Zena's lap and whispered, "Here's the rent you asked for, only this time it's for peace." Then she stood up, took one last look at the house that had both broken and built her, and walked toward her car. Tay was waiting, leaning against the car door, his familiar warm smile grounding her. "Ready?" he asked softly. Bella took a deep breath, glanced back at the porch one last time, and said, "Yes, I finally paid my rent for peace." They drove off together, the sun setting behind them like the closing of a painful chapter. Later that week, Bella opened her own cafe, her dream project, a cozy space filled with art, laughter, and warmth. On the front wall, in bold letters, hung a message she wrote herself. "Home isn't a place, it's who chooses to keep you." People stopped to read it every day, many not knowing the story behind it. But for Bella, it was more than words. It was her truth, her closure, and her freedom.